A very good evening to all the listeners and aspirants. Today is the uh, today is the third day of our English classes, and we are going to continue our discussion on poetry today. Once again, we have uh, Senior Professor Dr. Gurunath Badigir sir with us, who will be speaking about poetry, and he will be continuing from where he had left yesterday. So today, uh, maybe he can even cover all the aspects of poetry, the history of poetry. So on behalf of all the listeners, I once again welcome Dr. Gurunath Badgir sir to this lecture. Welcome you, sir. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you,
And
sir.
dear listeners, uh, now let us listen to Dr. Gurunath Badgir sir.
Welcome back to the third session of this coaching program organized by Karnataka State Akamadevi Women's University. Thank you, Professor Akshay, for anchoring this show. Now I continue from where I left yesterday. Dear friends, we have been talking about English poetry of different ages. We began with Geoffrey Chaucer. We came up to John Milton yesterday. And I would like to continue from where I stopped yesterday. So that was a discussion. Yesterday we have had a discussion about Geoffrey Chaucer and his times. Then we talked about Renaissance and various important poets like Edmund Spenser. And then we moved towards Shakespeare. We discussed the metaphysical school of poetry. Yeah, and we also spoke about importance of John Donne in the use of conceits and how Donne played an important role. And we also discussed John Milton and his poetry and the important aspects like Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, Lycidas, sonnets. And today I will move forward with the Age of Enlightenment and neoclassical poets. Um, and today we have actually a short time. We have to cover various poets. I will be scrolling through various poets and discuss some important aspects about the poets of England, at the same time poets from different parts of the world. I'll be just highlighting you, and as it is agreed yesterday, we will be talking about significance of poets and important works. When it comes to Alexander Pope, 18th century is also known as Augustan Age. It's also known as Neoclassical period, Age of Enlightenment. The poetry of 18th century is something different from the poetry of 17th century or 16th century. Here, there is a rich harvest of classical poetry. And the persons like Alexander Pope, who is known as the representative poet of Augustan age, wrote wonderful satires and mock epic during this time. And his poetry is known for perfect versification, whether it is heroic couplet or writing of mock epic. Uh, this Alexander Pope is superb in writing satires. He wrote a number of poems like Rape of the Lock as a mock epic has created a new genre in English poetry. How in Rape of the Lock he magnifies the trivial aspects, ordinary aspects into a great poetry. How he describes Belinda and Peter, and how Lord Peter cuts the lock of Belinda, how it is considered as a great act. Mm, you know, that is the main theme of Rape of the Lock. And naturally, the 18th century poetry is all about the upper class, urban, sophisticated, aristocratic. So here you see, Rape of the Lock presents a very nice example of mock epic. He wrote some epistles, epistle to Doctor, but not epistle to. He has written other epistles also. So obviously, this is one of the famous satires by Alexander Pope. The Dunciad is a satire. He wrote essays in criticism, essay on man. We have many sections, epistles in essay on man also. The famous line, the proper study of mankind is man. Know thyself, are the famous lines that we come across in the poetry of Alexander Pope. We remember Pope for his versification, we remember Pope for his mock epic, we remember Pope for harsh satire that he has written in his various collections. Moving on, in the same century, that is 18th century, we have a famous poet like Thomas Gray. Thomas Gray is known for his wonderful elegy. It is one of the best elegies written in English, elegy written in country churchyard. Gray began to show the interest in nature, interest in rural, which is not a characteristic of a neoclassical poetry. There is a kind of a deviation or a shift from urban poetry to rural poetry, in which we see people like Thomas Gray writing about the peasants. That's what in elegy written in country churchyard. The curfew tolls, the knell of parting day. Now, how in this elegy he speaks about the farmers, the peasants who are now in the grave, and what kind of life these people have led. They lived without ambition, but they were happy. There was no conflict in their mind. And that's they lived far from the madding crowd. Later, Thomas Hardy used this sentence for writing a particular novel, Far from the Madding Crowd. That's why he's another poem, The Spring, The Bard, The Progress of Poesy are significant poems. What we see in Thomas Gray shows all the qualities of a romantic poet, but his versification or style of writing was classical. That's why he is still considered as a classical poet. But as far as description is concerned, his description of nature, description of village is excellent. We move towards romantic movement, and this is one of the important ages in the history of English literature. And we talk about how romanticism started in England, how romanticism created wonderful poetry, wonderful poets, wonderful novels, prose writers. So the people were already tired of classical poetry, classical prose, and obviously there was a build up, and it is shown in the form of new poetry. And in the historical incidents like fall of Bastille, the French Revolution in 1789 gave Philip strength to the poets, because you know how Wordsworth sang in phrase of French Revolution. Bliss was it that dawn to be alive, but to be young was very heaven. Was the singing in praise of French Revolution. And we know that the lyrical ballads were published in 1798 and four poems of Coleridge and other poems of Wordsworth were published, and it marks the beginning of Romanticism in England. Under this heading, we will be discussing William Blake, William Wordsworth, S.T. Coleridge, uh, P.B. Shelley, Lord Byron, and John Keats. When it comes to S.T. Coleridge, S.T. Samuel Taylor Coleridge is naturally one of the best poets of um, Romantic period. He is known for the use of supernaturalism in his poetry, supernatural elements like the ghost, supernatural elements like the dead man coming back, Gothic cathedrals, and all evil spirits, such things. Um, the two important things you can see in S.T. Coleridge. One, and the medieval elements. He recreated medieval England, and like in Arthurian romances. You have that Middle Ages presented in his poetry. But when it comes to supernatural elements, some of his poems are very, very important. And to quote, one has to focus on his four poems: Rhyme of Ancient Mariner, which is a ballad actually. It tells you the story of Mariner. You know, it is in this poem he writes about how the mariner sets forth for a sail. His his ship was stopped in the ice, and he beautifully describes ice is here, ice is there, ice is everywhere. Then the ship was not moving. It was during this time the bird albatross comes. It comes like a Christian soul. The ship begins to move, but somehow the mariner took his bow and shot the bird dead. And after shooting the bird dead, things begin to change. The ship begin to enter in a very hot atmosphere. The water is exhausted, and all the 200 sailors died. They sucked their blood because there was no water, and they died thirsty. That's water everywhere, nor did a drop to drink. Water everywhere. All the birds did shrink. As a famous lines we find in Rhyme of Ancient Mariner. And later the mariner becomes alone because all the sailors are dead and he is alone there. He is actually the puppy or the sinner. And he becomes alone, and Coleridge describes beautifully, alone, alone, all alone, alone in the wide, wide sea. This loneliness is beautifully described by Coleridge. Sea and the sky, sky and the sea. That magnanimity of the sea, both are same. Sea and the sky and the sea. He looked at the sky is blue. He looked at the sea is blue. He is weary, and then there was repentance in him, and this repentance leads to some kind of renunciation. You see, that's what we call this poem. It is not a story of crime and punishment, but a story of sin and expiation, papa and prayaschita. Marinar begin to tell the story to every person. That's why in the beginning of the poem we come to know that he catches hold of three wedding guests, and tells them the story. That's a wonderful thing, actually. It is often compared to Macbeth also. Macbeth killed the guest, Duncan, and that's why he killed sleep and sleep killed Macbeth. That is also the story of sin and expiation, but his expiation ends in death. But in case of Mariner, he is saved by some hermit ship. And that's why Christabel is another poem. It remained incomplete, of course. Christabel is a good girl, and there is Geraldine, a bad woman, and Christabel's mother was dead. And, the ghost of the mother, in fact, mm, helps her. And in Christabel, we come to know that he has created wonderful medieval atmosphere. That is and the conflict between the good and the evil. And finally, good is victorious, the evil is defeated. Dejection and Ode is called a swan song of S.T. Coleridge. He writes like W.B. Yeats' circus animal dissertation. In Dissection and Ode, he laments the loss of poetic power. Of course, he loved Sarah, and he was not able to. Of course, is addressed to Sarah also, the sister-in-law of William Wordsworth, the sister of Mary Hutchinson. Okay, and Kubla Khan is always remembered for its beauty. And Kubla Khan, the creation, the stuff is written in only 54 lines, I think. It's a dream fragment. That is why dream element is one of the important things in ST Coleridge. Um, you can see the pleasure dome with the caves of ice, 5 miles meandering, a woman wailing for her demon lover. These are wonderfully described in Kubla Khan, the Chinggis Khan's, the dream, the reading of Purchase's pilgrimage, and how this dream come to him is a wonderful thing that you have to remember while reading S.T. Coleridge. S.T. Coleridge is also remembered for his wonderful criticism, that's Biographia Literaria, and his concept of fancy and imagination. That's another important aspect of S.T. Coleridge. He had some kind of differences of opinion with Wordsworth as far as use of uh, diction in poetry. Coming to Wordsworth, actually, Wordsworth should be considered as the greatest of romantic poets. And we consider him as the high priest of nature. Uh, he was a great friend of Coleridge. We know that they are workmates, and they enjoyed the Lake District. They enjoyed walking tours and shared many things, and both published lyrical ballads. Both are influenced by French Revolution. Yes, we normally consider um, Wordsworth as the greatest of romantic poets. And mm, Wordsworth wrote number of lyrical ballads, contributed 19 poems in lyrical ballads, 4 poems from Coleridge. Very important poems are Ode on Intimations of Immortality, Tintern Abbey. Tintern Abbey is said to be one of the compact and the most representative I hope you are listening to me. Uh, I can share the slide, no problem. The slide is ready. Uh, there's some network issue. Okay. Yeah, it's set right now. Going, yes, going back, back to the romantic poets. We were talking about William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth was influenced by French Revolution, and I was telling you something about Tinter. Tinternaby is considered. If you are not able to read all the poems of William Wordsworth, it is better to read Tinternaby. It is, Tinternaby is the product of his return to Wye Valley. He writes about digi, joys, and aching raptures. He considers nature as guide, teacher, nurse, the soul of all my moral being. Nature is the soul of all his moral being. That's why Tinternaby plays a very important role. Lucy poems are another important aspects of Wordsworth's poetry. Lucy, he wrote five Lucy poems. Lucy Gray, she lived in under sun and shower, and she lived under the mosses, and she died in 3 years. So Lucy Gray, it is the ideal human he created in the form of Lucy, and Lucy is Wordsworth's own creation. So Lucy poem, and apart from that, wonderful lyrics like "Solitary Reaper," the product of his Scottish tour, "Daffodils," a wonderful lyric, "To the Cuckoo." As a sonneteer, he is famous for two important sonnets. "The Word is Too Much with Us." That's a wonderful sonnet in which he writes about the age. The word is too much with us. Of late, we lay waste our powers in getting and spending. At times, he said, we are out of tune. We are out of tune. And somehow, we have lost sense. We have lost touch with nature, and our behavior is totally different. And Milton, "Thou should live at this hour" is another interesting, poem of William Wordsworth. That's why Wordsworth is considered as one of the important poets of Romantic period. The prelude is one of the longest poems, and it is called "Spiritual Autobiography" of William Wordsworth. So, prelude can be studied for the reasons that how Wordsworth enjoyed nature from the beginning itself. And that's why prelude is important and in Wordsworth's poetry. Coming to the next poet, P.B. Shelley. Shelley is famous because for two reasons. He is also an angry young man, a revolutionary poet. And one more thing, philosophizing nature is very, very good. If Wordsworth enjoyed digi, joys, and aching rapture, he was just dancing with the daffodils. Uh, Wordsworth talks about a thing of beauty, joy forever. Of course, the word sentence was written by kids, but it is applied to Wordsworth very much. He was the man who recollected all the things in tranquility. That's why Wordsworth was so much dancing with the daffodils, enjoying all those things. And Coleridge was more related to supernatural world. But Shelley philosophized nature. Shelley philosophized nature. His poems are known for philosophic note, and particularly "Ode to Skylark," "Ode to West Wind." The famous lines like "Our sweetest songs are those that come that tell us saddest thoughts. Heard melodies are sweet, and those unheard are sweeter. Of course, it is a Keatsian one. But our sweetest songs are those that tell us saddest thoughts come from Shelley. And particularly, Ode to the West Wind is one of the interesting odes written by P.B. Shelley. He writes, "Oh, West Wind, you are a destroyer and preserver." You know, finally, in the last stanza, he says, "West wind means it disturbs. It disturbs the leaves and bring the seeds to the grave." And again, we talk about burial of the dead in Eliot's Wasteland. Seeds are buried by west wind, and they are, in fact, given a new life. What Bendre says, Varushakvandu Hasatu Janana, Varushakvandu Hasatu Marana. Nature is given new life, no new. And west wind is one of the important, like our monsoon winds in India, west wind in England is very important. You are a destroyer and preserver. You are Brahma as well as Shankara. In that way, so obviously, the destruction is for the good. The clouds are disturbed and the rain comes. The mosses are disturbed and there is a shaking of the sea. All these things. Finally, he says, "Lift me as a wave, as a leaf, I fall upon the thorns of life. I bleed," he says. There is a surrender to nature. All the romantic poets try to overcome nature in the beginning when they are young, but when they come to know that nature is everything, and there is a surrender. The Revolt of Islam is one of the revolutionary poems, and that is very, very important part of Shelley's poetry. Ozymandias, one has to focus, for it is one of the best sonnets from P.B. Shelley. It is in Ozymandias, he speaks about futility of human life. Boast, Ozymandias said, "I am king of kings, look on my works, a mighty and despair." Ozymandias is boasting about his big empire, but all the empire is gone in the sands, in the vast sands. His statue is broken, his visage is broken, and only the vast sands are seen. In the sands of time, everyone is destroyed. Don't boast about yourself. So, Ozymandias is a wonderful poem dealing with vanity of man and how our life is temporary. Moving on, I introduce you John Keats. John Keats is the sweetest poet, the most beautiful poet also. We use beautiful because he was really a beautiful, both in his face and in his poetry. He is also called the poet of beauty. His focus on beauty, his discussion on beauty is greater than that of any other poets of romantic period. So he another thing, he is also called a poet of senses. We are talking about five senses, Panchendriya. We are talking about sense of taste, sense of touch, sense of hearing, sense of smell, olfactory, gustatory, auditory images. His poetry feeds all the senses. That's why he's called the most sensuous of all the uh, romantic poets. He wrote Greek poems, many lyrics and sonnets. His important poems are Ode to Nightingale, "My heart aches, drowsy, numbness, pains." So that's what Wordsworth was, "Digi, joys, and aching rapture." Even the happiness is also aching your heart. Okay, that kind of intensity is seen in the poems of these people. That's what the poem begins. "My heart aches, drowsy, numbness, pains." You have a wonderful Greek poems like Hyperion, Endymion. in which we come to know wonderful statements. Truth is beauty, beauty is truth. A thing of beauty is a joy forever. And we have wonderful ballad written by John Keats, La Balade Sans Mercy. La Balade Sans Mercy is said to be little autobiographical. It's about a knight who come in contact with a beautiful lady and with whom he made love, and he was left alone on the cold hillside. Her hair were long and her foot was light. She was full beautiful. That is an interesting thing. You can see in La Balade Sans Mercy. It's a French title, A Beautiful Lady Without Mercy. On first looking into Chapman's Homer is a sonnet by John Keats. It's a representative sonnet by John Keats. He writes about Chapman's translation of Homer. How beautiful, how it takes you to the great world of Homer is beautifully written in a sonnet on first looking into Chapman's Homer. Lord Byron is another revolutionary poet like Shelley. Byron fought against injustice. He wrote odes, lyrics, and satires. He's only the man who wrote satires uh, in the group of romantic poets. So he's also known as the angry young man in the group of romantic poets. Ocean is a beautiful poem. Child Herod's Pilgrimage. Don John is a satire. The Bride of Abydos. So Byronic, we are talking about Byronic hero. It's a signature, style of Byron. Whenever we are talking about angry young man, we call him Byronic hero. So it is the stamp of his personality. So that's why Byron is remembered in the history of English poetry. So there are so many poets. That's why I'm just moving on very fast. William Blake, his name was very much discussed. It is to be discussed early, before early romantics. Um, of course, there is some kind of a reshuffling of the slides, but we discuss all the important parts. Why Blake is important for us? He is important for two important collection of poems, Songs of Innocence and Songs of Experience. It is this in Songs of Experience, he writes the representative poem like the tiger. In Songs of Innocence, he writes the representative poem like the lamb. And there are many poems like A Poison Tree. In the tiger, tiger, tiger burning bright in the forest of the night. It is in this poem he writes, the one who created tiger also created the lamb. What furnace, what anvil, what a work of art. So how tiger is burning bright in the forest. It's a wonderful poem. And other poems in experience are Black Thursday and a Poison Tree. Poison Tree should be remembered. I was angry with my friend. I told it my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it my wrath did grow. We should remember some of his poems. And we have some interesting poets like Robert Burns, who is famous for his lyrics. My love is like red, red rose. We have Walter Scott also during this time, who wrote a wonderful Scottish ballads, Lady of the Lake. We have Robert Southey, Mary Shelley, Robinson, and other poets of this time. So with this, I am closing discussion on romantic poets. Moving on, I will take up other important poets of Victorian age. Victorian age, before we talk about these poets, particularly Alfred Lord Tennyson, Robert Browning, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Thomas Hardy, Gerald Manley Hopkins, we should know that there is a shift in administration. Queen Victoria became the Queen of England, and she ruled England for a long time. And what is important in this age, we talk about the age of conflict and compromise. There was a conflict between the religion and science because of the book written by Charles Darwin, Origin of the Species, the theory of evolution of man. There was a social unrest in England after the Napoleonic Wars were ended. And obviously, we read in uh, novels of Charles Dickens. It was a hard times actually. And in Tale of Two Cities, he says it's the best of the time, worst of the times. Of course, it is a period of what we can say contradictions. Contradictions. There was peace as well as unrest. Peace and prosperity, because England was rich because it has brought so much of wealth from the colonies. But at the same time, the average Englishman also not in peace because there was unemployment and so many issues. So when it comes to Lord Tennyson, Lord Tennyson's poetry is representative of 19th century Victorian poetry. It of course speaks about conflict between science and religion, doubt and faith, materialism and spirituality. These two voices of Victorian age are constantly heard in Tennyson's poetry. Tennyson was also a great nature poet, but there is a difference between Tennyson and Wordsworth. Wordsworth was in fact influenced by digi joys and aching raptures. He was simply enjoying the very external aspects of nature. But Tennyson lived in the age of science, and his observation is minute, microscopic. Even he could see a small dot on the leaf. That's the way. If Wordsworth's poetry represents joy, Tennyson's poetry represents peace in nature. Joy in nature, peace in nature are important. So, his famous poem In Memoriam Tennyson on the death of his friend Arthur Hallam. Arthur Hallam. In this elegy, we read of great conflict between faith and doubt. Ring out the wild bells, ring in the new is a famous line in elegy. And Tennyson wrote wonderful poems like Luxley Hall, which describes the Hello. I think you are getting me. There can be, yeah, it's live now. We were talking about Alfred Tennyson. Alfred Tennyson is always remembered for the best of his poems, like In Memoriam, an elegy written on the death of his friend Arthur Hallam, and it is one of the most important pastoral elegies written in English. And Tennyson is also known for his wonderful dramatic monologues. Dramatic monologue, which Browning was special. When it comes to this, hello, now it is clear here, but I don't know whether it is broadcasting or not. Uh-huh. Not clear. Okay, okay, okay. Please check it. I will also check. Okay, please. Okay, it is being broadcast, and we have. Okay, it is being broadcast, and we have. It is being broadcast. It is being broadcast. Yeah. There is some network issue now, and I think I have to stop at this point because there is some connectivity issue. I think I have to stop at this point because. And we will continue from where we stopped today. And Professor Akshay, please look into the viability. Hello. Okay. In my mobile, it is seen actually. Oh, we'll stop at this point.